Hi and welcome back to the channel. So as I promised, today we're going to cast on one and then hopefully get to knitting and purling. It'll depend on how long I talk and how long this takes me. So quick intro, casting on is to form that first edge, right? So there's a bunch of different methods that you can use to do this. I'm going to just do the long tail cast on method in this video because it's going to be one of the more common ones and it is fairly simple and you can use it for most anything. There are different types, and if people are interested I can talk about some of the other types in other videos, but for today we're going to talk about the long tail cast on, and then obviously knit and purl stitches, we'll talk a little bit more about them. I think that's it in terms of prep work for this. So without further ado, let's get to casting on. Okay, so long tail cast on method. First thing, obviously you need your needles and your yarn. So I'm using some cotton yarn because we're going to make a really quick knitted dishcloth. And you want, at least with dishcloths, you want something that's absorbent and will work really well, unless you're getting a scrubby thing. In that case, you can get away with more like an acrylic yarn, because cotton will absorb water, acrylic yarn doesn't. So I'm using cotton yarn, and I have a set here of size 7 needles, so 4.5 millimeter needles. So once you have your yarn and your needles, you can start set up for the long tail cast on method. So like the name suggests, you need a long tail. So I think that should be good. For this, it's generally an estimate. I think you can guesstimate it about 3 times what your final length should be, but it is a guesstimate. So you can always undo it and start again. It just takes some time. So the first thing that you do once you've figured out where you kind of want to put your point is you take the yarn, and then using your forefinger and thumb, you're going to take the yarn and put it around there. So you make essentially a triangle, right? So loop of yarn, triangle, with your pointer finger and your thumb being 2 points of your triangle, and then the third point gets held in your other finger so that you have tension on your yarn. So now that you have your yarn in a triangle, we're going to be casting on 45 stitches. So I'm initially going to do it with the way I usually do. I am right-handed, so my right hand is going to be manipulating the knitting needle, and my left hand's going to have the yarn. And then I'm going to attempt and switch it for all you left-handed people who might want to see what it looks like if you do it left-handed. It's not going to be as pretty. So when you take your needle and you're going to start it, what you want to do is you want to take your needle over the top part of your triangle, and once it's over, you're going to put it underneath the bottom part that's being held with your thumb. So over, under, circle it around and underneath the top one, and then your thumb obviously has got a loop around it. So you're going to take that loop and drop it around the front, and that's your first loop. So this is also known as a slip knot. There is another way to make it, but I can't ever remember how to do it. So I'm not going to even attempt to try and teach you how to do that. So now we have my triangle back again, right? But this time now we've started our stitch chain at the top of the triangle. So exactly like we did to create that first stitch, you start at the top, you're going to go underneath the one on the length that's being held by your thumb, underneath the top one, pull the yarn loop that you have on your thumb over top of the needle, drop it, and then use your thumb to basically create tension again. So that snugs up the stitch a little bit. You want it sort of snug, but not too snug, right? You want there to be some room between the two stitches, so you don't want to tighten it too much, but you also don't want to have it loose. So once again, under top, bring your stitch over and tighten it. Under, top, over, tighten. So this is going to use up some of that long length that you have right there. So I'm going to switch it around and attempt to do the same thing with my left hand holding the needle and my right hand holding the yarn. So same principles, right? Create the triangle. I have a triangle. It's a really sad looking triangle, but I do have a triangle. You go underneath the yarn being held by your thumb, underneath your yarn being held up top, and then you pull it over and snug it down. So do it again. Do it again. Underneath the thumb, underneath this finger, pull the yarn over, and then catch it and snug it down. Yeah. So as you can see, I'm not as comfortable with this hand, but I can do it. So if you're right-handed people really want to try it, you can do it this way too. But I will say one of the things, like, because I'm not as comfortable, I am using a little bit more. I'm not just using the needle, I am using my other finger a little bit. So it's helping keep that second loop that we picked up top on as I pull the other one over. Which actually might be helpful for you as you begin, even if you're doing it the other way. Just because it means that you're not going to drop it. So one of the things I think I remember having problems with originally doing this is that as I was trying to figure out how to get this thumb loop to come over, you can pull with your other finger and drop that yarn loop that you have up here off, which kind of defeats the purpose of this. So if you need like extra security, it's not an easy movement for you, just use your other finger kind of to help pull it along, and that'll help keep it where you want it. But now that I have demonstrated how to do it lefty for a little bit, I hope all of you lefties got that and can figure out the rest for yourselves. I'm gonna finish up with my right hand because, yeah, it's a lot faster for me this way. So you basically continue this until you have the number of stitches that you wanted on your needle, right? So I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. I have about half of what I need. You will find that knitting is a bunch of counting. So counting is going to become very important in your future. That one didn't go over. There we go. Yeah, basically you have to count for everything. There's a very true meme that I've seen talking about when you knit, you need to face the fact that you have to know how to count, and also be willing to face the fact that you may not be able to achieve that possibility. So yeah, when you're starting out, I would suggest you not be around annoying people who like to throw out random numbers and mess up your counts, because that will make it 10 times more difficult than it will be. Like, it's going to be difficult already generally to remember to keep count of everything. But to have someone throwing out random numbers to just mess you up, that can get really annoying really fast. So I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 32, 34, 36, 38, 40, 41. I need 4 more stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4. I should have 45 now. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 30, 32, 34, 36, 38, 40, 42, 44, 45. Okay, I have 45 stitches. So I have my cast on edge right now. So I've started with 45 stitches, and in the future, I want to make sure that I keep 45 stitches. So especially when you're first starting out, counting is incredibly important, and you may not be able to count as you're knitting them, but counting at the end of each row can be critically important for you to know if you've like dropped something or not. So now that we have a cast on, we have our stitches cast on, we have live stitches, right? So live means that they're looped and on your needles or on something that is holding them. And it also means that if you drop them, they will go away. So keep that in mind. Try not to drop your stitches. It's hard to find them again. So now that we have them on, what we're going to do is we're going to start with the knit stitch. So this is one of the very, very basic stitches of knitting. Since I am making a dishcloth with this, I'm going to do what I usually do, which is I usually incorporate my leftover tail into my knitting, just because it means then I don't have to weave in that end later, and I hate weaving in ends, so the less that I have to do, the happier I am. There are a variety of methods that I have found that means that I have less of that to do, so I continue to use them because I don't like weaving in ends. But other people may not. So one benefit obviously is I don't have to do anything with it later on. A con of it is that for the first couple of stitches, it's going to be a little bit bulkier than it will be when I get done with that doubled up yarn. So first things first, knitting, right? So knitting and purling are kind of the same stitch, but in reverse. And you can tell the difference between the two in that the knit stitches are going to kind of look like a V, while your purl stitches are going to be a bar, right? So it all depends on basically which side you're seeing of this loop right here. So in order to create a knit stitch, what we're going to do is we're going to take our needle and we're going to go in at the front to the back. So we go over, if you are right-handed and you're doing it with your right hand, you're going to take your needle and you're going to put the tip on the left side of the stitch that you're going to work through. You're going to push it through the loop of the stitch into the back. So front to back, and then you want to wrap your yarn around that needle. And then once you have that yarn wrapped around the needle, what you're going to do is you're going to take that needle and you can use your finger, right? So this is continental style, I forgot to tell you. It's continental style, that's why I'm holding my yarn in my left hand instead of my right hand. But I'm going to take your needle and you're going to pull the yarn through that loop. And then once you have the yarn pulled through the loop on your right-handed needle, you're going to pull the stitch that you were just in off, because it is now no longer live. It is now basically made a new stitch, right? So do it again, and finding the best point view. Okay, so knitting needle, we go to the left of my stitch. We're gonna go through the stitch. You wanna have your stitch kind of near the end of your needles where that taper is, because it makes it a lot easier to do. But take it, you're gonna go through from the left through to the back, wrap it around your needle, pull your needle with the yarn through, and then drop the stitch. So left side, back, around, pull through, drop. So like I said, this is the continental style. If I were to switch it up and do more of an English style, I would be holding my yarn in my right hand or leaving it down. You do the same movement, right? You're going to still go to the left, through, and to the back, but instead of using your left hand in order to control your yarn, you take your right hand, you wrap it around, and then do the same thing. You pull the stitch through and then drop that knit stitch off. So once again, in through the left side, out through the back. Right hand would then take it around, wrap it, and then you would pull it through. I find this method slower, so I don't like to use it. And also I got taught the other way, so it's a lot faster for me to do it right-handed. I will do a left-hand, I'll do a left-handed purl, or left-handed knit once I finish this row. So yeah, now that I've reached the end of that double, you see that all of my stitches on my needle have been doubled, and now I'm going to just continue using the yarn that I have, just the single one, and you'll be able to see pretty soon. Yeah, so these all are doubled, that's single, so this will be a little bit thicker than these will be because it's single versus double. If you don't like the looks of that in the yarn, then I would suggest not doubling it, and you just end up having to weave in more ends at the very end. But if you're like me and you don't like weaving in ends, feel free to not do that. Another thing that I have found that is helpful for me when I am doing a knit stitch is I like to use my middle finger and my thumb in order to make it a little bit easier to get my yarn or needle to go through there quickly. So I hold the back of the stitch that I'm working on with my middle finger, and then I use my thumb to push the stitch forward so that it makes it a lot easier for my needles to go straight through. And then once my needles through, I can just basically snag the yarn that I'm holding in tension with my forefinger and pull it through. So yeah, you're still going in through the left to the back, and then pulling your yarn through, but it's just a little bit faster for me. In this case, there's no real wrong way to knit unless you're doing a purl stitch, and then it's not a knit stitch, it's a purl stitch. So doing that circle or going through and just catching it, either one works fine. You're still gonna end up with the same looking stitch. Any other advice on this? If you work near the ends of your needles, it is faster and easier to get your yarn in and through, but it does mean that you are more likely to drop a stitch. So when I say drop a stitch, I mean it basically falls off, right? If it does that. If you have this happen to you, which you probably will, and even as an advanced knitter or intermediate knitter, it happens to me fairly frequently. So if that happens to you, the best thing that you can do is not panic. Don't panic and be gentle, right? So don't pull on it, because if you do pull on it, it will unravel. And that's much more of a pain than going through and trying your best to get it back on. So now that we have gone one way, I'm going to show all the left-handed knitters how to possibly do it. All you lefties, if you want to do it, feel free. So we're going to go both English and continental. This is going to be a lot harder for me than it is going the other way, but we will muddle through. Okay, so lefties. Instead of going to the left and to the back, what you're going to do is you're going to go from the right into the back. And if you're doing English style, right, you would still wrap it around, pull it off, drop the stitch, right? So right, back, round, pull over, drop. So this would be more of a English style, right, where I'm holding it in my left hand as I do it. Now, if I want to do more of the continental style where you hold it in the hand that you're actually using to hold your stitches that you're going to work on, right, back, round, be like this. You're still going to the right, into the back, round, and over. And I am still holding on to my, so I personally am using the forefinger of the hand that I am using on my, whatever my dominant, I guess, hand is. For here, in order to keep my stitch, I'm using it to hold on to this new stitch that I'm making as I pull it over, so that it doesn't fall off easily. Right, so as I knit these stitches, any other advice I have for left-handed people doing this? I don't think I have a ton. Happily enough, at least with knitting, there's no right-handed or left-handed yarn or needles. So you don't have to worry about that in terms of finding anything. Right-handed, left-handed, either hand works. Because it's a two-handed process and there's nothing inherently biased about either of them. Obviously you know about scissors, so right, you will eventually need scissors. But yeah, I don't think there's anything too inherently different about left-handed knitting versus right-handed knitting. It is a matter of preference, right? So I would say this, if you are left-handed, you may feel more comfortable doing it like this way, right? So I'm basically reversing how I normally knit, and doing it with my left-handed, is my left hand is being kind of my dominant hand here. But if you're left-handed, you may, like some people are more comfortable actually using their right hand to do this than their left hand, and vice versa. So both left-handed and right-handed people, feel free to experiment, right? Don't just do it one way because you think that's the only way you can do it, right? You can experiment. This is a craft, and it is going to be your craft, right? So if you find yourself more comfortable doing it this way than you are doing it the right-handed way, do it this way, even if you aren't left-handed. Likewise, if you're left-handed, don't feel like you have to do it this way and you can't do it the other way. It's whatever is most comfortable for you, because this is something that I'm hoping you're taking up because you enjoy it and you want to enjoy it. It's not much fun if it's not enjoyable, right? So if you're feeling really uncomfortable doing it one way, switch it up. That is the beauty about this, is that as long as you're getting the right stitch look, it doesn't necessarily matter too much how you got there. If you went left-handed or if you went right-handed, if you did it upside down or underwater, any of those work, quite frankly. Now I'm getting close to that part where I have those double stitches, right? So I've just been going through single stitches. Now, if you didn't do like I did and basically weave in your end as you were creating your first row, then you don't have to worry about this. But if you did do what I did, you are gonna have to worry a little bit here, right? So I have doubled up stitches, and I want to make sure that I go through both of my doubled up stitches as I do this. That way I don't create extra stitches, right? So we are going to count at the end of this and prove that I can count to 45 still. Yay! You thought you'd never do this past elementary. You were wrong. So if you don't go through both of them, right, you can end up knitting 2 stitches per, and that will create extra stitches, which will change the shape, right? So we're trying to make a square here. And if I add extra stitches at any of these points, what's going to happen is instead of making a square, we're going to make more of like a parallelogram. So yeah, no parallelograms or weird shapes. We just want to make a plain square. So with that, I am almost done with these. And only 2 more stitches. Yeah, and it's looking like I will be making a different video to talk about purling, just because this has been going on for a while, and since I'm doing it this way, hopefully my purl video will be a little bit shorter and I can do cast off during that one as well. Okay, now that I have gone through and knit all my stitches, we get to count them and make sure that I have the same number as I started out with. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 32, 34, 36, 38, 40, 42, 44, 45. Yay! I have the same number as I started with. So when you're starting out doing this, I would suggest you do that every time you finished a row. Because if you don't, you might drop a stitch or add a stitch in that row. And the minute that you do that, it's going to put off your entire thing, right? So you want to catch that earlier rather than later. It doesn't matter so much with like these kind of projects where we're doing a dishcloth, but if you're trying to make a sweater or anything where you kind of need things to line up in certain ways, wrong stitch counts suck, because then you have to figure out where you made your mistake and then basically rip out everything to get back to where the mistake was. And speaking from experience, you don't want to do that. So my suggestion, count, especially when you're starting out. Count until you're sure that you're not going to be losing stitches as you're knitting or purling. So with that, we are done with how to, 1, cast on, and 2, how to knit. Okay, now that we've talked about casting on and knitting, the next stitch is purl. So let me show you the difference between the 2 stitches. So you can see here we have a bunch of knit stitches up front. Now the reverse of a knit stitch is a purl stitch, which you can kind of see in the back, right? So these bumps would be considered purl stitches, although I knit them, because it's the reverse of the right side. So in order to make a purl stitch, you're going to kind of do the opposite of what you do for knitting, right? So for knitting, we go in on the left into the back. So for purling, we go in at the right into the front. And when we go into the front, we then pull our yarn through the loop and create the new stitch. And then just like the knit, we drop the old stitch off. So once again, we go in from the right in the front, pull our yarn through, creating that new loop and pulling it off. Now, once again, this is more of a continental style of purling, and I am doing it fairly quickly because of how I'm holding my yarn, right? I'm holding my yarn in my left hand, kind of right behind that stitch. That way all I have to do with my knitting needle is kind of catch that yarn and pull it through. If you're going to knit more of a, English style, right? So in that case, instead of holding your yarn in your left hand, you hold it in your right hand. You're still going to want to have it in the front. That is one thing different about how you hold your yarn in purling versus knitting, right? You want to have your yarn in the front because that's where you don't want to twist it around your stitches. So similar to the continental style, you put it in the right side to the front, and instead of holding it with your left hand and pulling it through, you wrap it around with your right hand and then continue the pull through process. So once again, right, front, wrap, pull through. I'm gonna go back to my preferred style because it's faster for me and I'm more comfortable with it. So for this row, we're going to purl the entire row so that we end up with a nice contrast with our previous row. I guess other things to talk about with knitting and purling is sometimes you do have different tensions between the two. So you may have a tighter tension with one versus the other. Some of it is going to depend on how you hold your yarn, right? So, or how you wrap your yarn. And different tensions, so that what that means is that like sometimes your rows might be further apart or closer together depending on how tightly you knit it. So if you knit it really tightly, it'll be closer. If you knit it loosely, it'll be further apart. And that can change how your fabric looks. To fix it, it's really kind of a notice what you're doing and try and relax or tighten up, depending on which direction you want it to go. So this is all if you're right-handed, right? So I am obviously all demonstrating right-handed on this one because I'm going right to left. We will switch and do the left hand in just a second. Yeah, I don't think that I have any other advice on the purl stitch at this point. So now that I have gone one direction, we're going to reverse it for all you left-handed people out there. So just like when you're doing right hand, you're going to want to keep your yarn in front of your project, right? So, because if you keep it in the back, it's going to wrap around your stitch each time and it will make it look wrong because it will be wrong. So unlike right-handed where you go right in front, you're going to go left in front if you're doing it left-handed. Left, front, wrap, pull through. Same basic idea. It's just kind of a reversal of which direction you're going with these guys. I obviously am not as proficient with my left hand as I am with my right hand. But it probably is more realistic for anyone who's beginning knitting what it's gonna end up looking like for you. Another kind of tip as you're doing it, I know I talked about it a little bit with knitting, but it is perfectly fine to hold on to your yarn if you're having problems with it. If you are struggling to get it to like go through without holding on to it or anything, it's not wrong to basically hold down so that you can get it to come through the loop without falling off. It's much better that you do that than get really frustrated because you're not able to get it through and then giving up on knitting, because knitting is fun and is stress relieving once you get the hang of it. Let's see, other things. So I guess this is technically more of a continental style left-handed. If we're doing it English style, we would basically do this and then pull it over. Put through, circle around, pull it over. So you can see it doesn't really matter which style I use in order to get the yarn through. It's all creating that bump texture for my purl stitches. So I think the only other thing that I have to talk about, and we'll do that in the next row, and I'm just going to demonstrate it right-handed. I'm not going to bother right hand and left hand. Is we're going to talk a little bit about how to switch from a knit to a purl stitch in the same row, right? Because right now I've just been going through and we haven't changed which side the yarn goes on. We haven't tried to change from a knit stitch to a purl stitch or a purl stitch to a knit stitch. It's just all been the same. So we will do a quick discussion of how you go about switching up. And yeah, once you have basically these two basic stitches, you can do a bunch of knitting projects. Most, if not all of them, you'll be able to basically complete with just plain knits and purls and not doing anything fancy, not really learning any new tricks. So I would say the first thing, basically once you've gotten comfortable doing knits and purls, then feel free to venture out and do other things. Knits and purls and being able to count. Being able to count is really important in this as well. So if you feel confident in your knitting and your purling and that you are able to count, then feel free to start doing a little bit more advanced techniques. And looking up videos on how to do them. I may eventually get around to doing it if it's something that people want. But the basics for anything that you knit is going to be your knit and purls. That's like, the other stuff is nice, but it's not the bread and meat of it. Let's see, other things. I know I talked a little bit about the different types of material that your knitting needles can be made out of. As a beginner, you may find it more comfortable to use wooden ones because they're a little bit more sticky. They hold the yarn a little bit better. It's not quite as slidey as it would be if I were using a metal or a plastic knitting needle. So I'm much less likely to lose stitches. They're less likely to fall off of the wooden ones than they are some of the other ones. But if you're wanting to go fast, wooden ones are probably not the ones for you because since they are a little bit more sticky, they do catch more, and so you're not going to go as fast as you could. Okay, now that I have 4 rows done, now that we have finished doing the first teaching video, if you're interested in obviously seeing more, you can see my intro video previously. And if you're interested in seeing new things, obviously hit subscribe, follow, like, comment, do all the things that you want to do, or none of them if you really don't care. So yeah, I'm here. Feel free to make any comments. If you have suggestions, I'd be happy to listen to them. So see you in the next video.